The Gemini F55 was one of two LMGs we've got coming for 3.2. Gemini is a company that seems to be focused on this kind of flashy weaponry that's being sold to kind of like these wealthy mercenaries and privateers and people like that. So we really wanted to incorporate that into how the weapon behaved. So we kind of took a look at looking at how high we could push the rate of fire, and that actually pushed us into kind of Gatling territory. So we've got the big, beefy, multi-barrel spinning Gatling kind of functionality there on the front. It's a very scary weapon for short ranges. This thing will be sending people kind of like looking for cover as soon as possible, or they get kind of turned to paste.
The F55, being a light machine gun, also has a very big drum magazine, which is something unique that we haven't done before in this fetch. So another thing that makes the F55 unique within the manufacturer is that due to it being pretty much a minigun, we decided not to add optic rails on top of the weapon, and you're pretty much stuck with iron sights. Furthermore, it also has a pretty elaborate piston recoil compensation system integrated into the stock of the gun to help with extended and long recoil.
This is basically the flashy, over-the-top, kind of like, it's not style over substance because you've still got both. The gun, the gun's no joke, but it's sort of made of premium materials, premium manufacturing. It's a little bit flashy. It's the kind of gun that you could imagine a sort of private security force. People who have fired guns will know every gun has its own personality, and so with all these things, we're trying to keep a sense of identity and personality with these weapons.
So the F55 is quite an interesting weapon from animation. It's got the side-loading drum ammo clip for the weapon. When it opens into camera. So with all weapon animations in first person, we try to keep the center of the screen clear. That's called our shooter box, essentially so that wherever you're pointing, you can see what's in front of you. Reloads, we try to keep it clear so there's no hand obstructing if enemies are coming towards you. The F55 has that drum which rotates outwards. That comes directly into that shooter box. So we had to really work out the best way to keep the weapon facing forwards, but not to block that with a hand coming up to grab the drum, pull it out, and then again put it back in without blocking too much of the screen.
The F55 is bigger than the Demeco. It's also, it is more complicated in terms of its visuals, just its overall construction. I could imagine this would have to be 3D printed for all the parts. It's quite complex in how it's all pieced together. One of the core things of the Gemini is the liquid cooling, basically, that's implemented on the side of it, and it's that it lends itself to sort of the over the topness, basically, of this weapon. It doesn't need it, but it's kind of, it was a nice little feature to add. This has basically a minigun on the front. It's a series of 6 barrels, so for higher fire rate. But when you look at it side to side with with the assault rifle and the pistol, you can see, okay, yeah, I see what's going on there.
So the recoil on the F55 that we're doing currently is not quite finished, but we're getting there. We want to get a good feeling of weight, power, but not look too ridiculous in first person with the gun shaking too much. So in DataForge, we've got a lot of control on different parameters of the weapon, of the gun. We can move the gun back. We can control how slow it returns to its default position. We can control how far it rotates up. We can control the rotation. We can control the camera of the head. So we've got an awful lot of control for recoil. It's basically a matter of tweaking to get the right proportion of backwards, rotation, head cam all together.
Claas & Werner Demeco is the second of the 2 LMGs we want to bring you for 3.2. Claas & Werner is a company, they're kind of the straight edge military manufacturer we've kind of got in game at the moment. And that kind of gets brought across through the laser pistol we've got and the Gallant energy rifle we currently have too. So we kind of wanted to mirror that in the LMG as well. We wanted this very stable kind of straight edge weapon, it's reliable, you know what to expect. It's for a big weapon, it's easier to handle than the others, but we also wanted to get across, like, if it's kind of this slower firing, kind of bit of a juggernaut of a weapon, it also needs to be very powerful.
This one has been through the mill. We've done a lot of revisions on this one. I think it's probably been through 4 concept artists. It's it's built out of polymer. It has minimal moving parts. Basically, that was always the initial brief. That, this is the opposite end of the spectrum. This shouldn't be flamboyant.
So in the previous stage, I take the model and I do lots of variation. We're given some idea of what parts should move when, but I like to kind of just play around with all the different parts, maybe give some different opinions, different variations of what could happen. So there's a lot of previs that goes on early in the process to figure out which parts look best when they're moving.
We've really just sort of beefed up the assault rifle essentially. And everything is slightly oversized and just has that beefier, more powerful feel to it, and that's kind of Klaus and Werner.
It's very similar to the Gallant, but what we've done with the reloads on the Demeco is try to really sell the fact that it's a military grade laser weapon. There's a part on the reload where we actually pull the left hand away completely. We let the weapon do the talking. We put the magazine back in, and then everything on the weapon just works by itself. The spinner starts up. We've got the side flaps that slowly go in. Then you smack it closed. It's there. It's ready.
The Demeco, being a light machine gun, has 2 main features which set it apart from other weapons. One being the carrying handle, due to its huge size as well as weight, and the other one being a larger than usual battery, in order to maintain the high rate of fire for a longer period of time. After we completed the first pass and looked at the gun in the game for the first time, we felt that the actual carrying handle being centered right on top of the weapon obscured the player's vision a little bit too much during ADS view. Therefore, we offset it to the side and introduced a little angle to it just to get it out of the way. The magazine itself, the animators gave us feedback saying that they had a difficult time getting a good grip on it due to it being very smooth on the exterior surface. So what we ended up doing is adding recesses and a little grip pattern for them to reach into and get a better grip.
The Gallant is a very kind of, it's almost like the opposite weapon to the F-55. It's interesting playing with both, and everyone always finds a favourite. Obviously the F-55 is kind of a bit of a beast to handle. Like, it'll take a bit of practice trying to use that thing and use it well, whereas the Demeco is a lot more reliable, because obviously the F-55 is always, on paper, is always going to look like it does way more than the Demeco ever would, but in reality, just because of the range advantage you get from the Demeco, how much more stable it is to fire, and the spread of the bullets coming out of the weapon and everything, like the F-55 will be way more powerful at short ranges in corridors and stuff, but the Demeco is going to be much more, it's going to be useful in those situations as well, but it's going to be a lot more useful planet side in kind of like these long, more stretched out and bigger environments where, and even just through the nature of it being slower firing, you're going to have a lot more ammunition to use. You're going to be able to fire for longer, and you're not going to find yourself in these situations where you've suddenly burnt out of all your ammo.
Obviously this is an energy gun, so it's basically a larger battery pack, a larger firing mechanism, to cope with the increased firing rate and power. Has a very similar cooling mechanism, so we still have the little door that pops open, reveals the cylinder tech that's in there just spinning down and cooling down. We'll get nice effects and smoke coming out of it and stuff, or steam, or whatever the effects team want to do. In the animation, you'll have you often see most of the weapon when you go into the reload. I mean, that's kind of your sort of weapon inspect almost, really. That's the time where you really get to see a lot of the weapon, a lot of the internals, and you really sort of get to appreciate it. And it's a great opportunity for the animators to do the reload. And that's where a lot of the personality comes into the weapon as well, whether, depending on what the latch mechanism is. And each manufacturer's got a different mechanism. Some are fiddly, some are just heavy duty and easy, some are quite mechanical, some are just a flick of a button. So that's also another good way of getting personality in there as well. I can see sort of a tight-knit group of operatives coming in with this weapon, and and it's the full support. You'll have your LMG guy for support, and then you'll have a bunch of guys with assault rifles, and so it'll be like a fully rounded out team.